rolling.
That's right. We're rolling through time. So, of course, I'm not an expert on anything time travel other than what I've seen in the movies.
Me neither.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's a really cool concept, and I like to read about time travel, and I got a couple uh, books on like astronomy and astrophysics that I never did take a class on astronomy, but I wanted to, but at the time it would have just been an extra class that I would be taking. But it's still really, really fascinating topics, and some of them I think are just real brain busters. You can feel your brain like, in the cartoons they have like the gears turning and the smokes coming out of their
Oh yeah,
ears.
absolutely.
So yeah, we'll definitely get into some of those aspects of time travel. So whether your mode of time travel is a DeLorean, a TARDIS, a hot tub, or a time turner,
Hmm.
you get to see some serious stuff. Which
Well,
I actually rehearsed that last night. I was like, what can I say to get this started?
oh yeah, you got some good references in there. Of the four of those, I mean, the DeLorean's just the classic mode, I would say. Especially,
Absolutely.
especially if you're American and you're not familiar with Doctor Who. But a hot tub would be pretty cool. You're relaxing. It's
Yeah.
I would imagine that's a good way to travel. Although it
Yeah,
might get a
and
little
plus
weird.
I'm sure time travel, as we've seen in the movies, can be very stressful, so a hot tub is sounds like a pretty good way to go.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know how much it helped them to not be stressed, but I imagine it helped just a little bit.
Right, yeah, and I've never seen Doctor Who before, but I know that there's about 13, 14 different doctors. Now, I don't
There's
know
so
if
many I
they're.
can't even keep track.
Yeah, yeah, have you seen it?
I've seen bits and pieces here and there, mostly of the Matt Smith and David Tennant ones. Little
Okay.
bit of the Chris Eccleston, but he wasn't in the role that long.
Now, are the I know there's different doctors. Are they supposed to be the same doctor or just like different
From what I
doctors like
remember, it is the
pass the mantle?
same. From what I remember, it is the same being. I'm no expert, so someone else can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong. But it's the same person every time, just like a different incarnation.
Okay, that's what I was kind of
Yeah,
thinking when you said that they're just reborn maybe or
something like that. Or like they just take on a new form. Again, I can't remember the details. It's been a long time.
right. And I've never seen it. I'm just all I know about it is that there's a TARDIS. I think that's what it's called. It's like the phone booth,
Exactly.
and
That's
there's
like the most
different.
iconic image.
So that's kind of interesting if you're traveling through time. I think Quantum Leap is like that. You travel
Oh
through
yeah.
time, but you in the different time periods you become a different person, or you just inhabit the body of a different individual. Maybe not so much you travel back in time and boom, you're Abraham Lincoln or somebody, but you're just kind of seeing that particular point of time from, I don't know if it's a specific person or just you end up in the random body of somebody living at that time. But that's not really anything that you see, or at least that I've seen in most time travel films,
It's
is that
pretty
becoming a
unique
different
quantum
person.
leap from what I've seen. Like otherwise it's just they're the same person that they were. It's just nobody knows who they are and they can't verify anything. So it's like they just appeared out of nowhere, which they kind of did.
All right, cool. Now, time travel is. I don't know if you've ever done any kind of not really deep dives, but just kind of research into time travel. But according to Albert Einstein, it is theoretically possible, but we just don't have the means to actually make it happen. So when you're watching all of these different time travel movies, they all have their own specific rules and regulations for how you can travel through different moments of time. So, did you read the article that I sent?
Which one?
Uh, well, it was like a part one and two, but it was
Oh,
basically
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, for anybody watching, this is called "How to Time Travel Without Destroying the Universe," and it's giving different scenarios from different movies of how time travel can or cannot affect the future. And I think all of this is really interesting because it can happen, but it's theoretical, so we don't know how it could affect the future if it even could. And actually, just as a little reference here, just wrote down the 8 different scenarios that they give. A couple of them being history can be altered, which we saw in Back to the Future
Yeah.
when Marty travels back in time. It's kind of like that ripple effect. Whatever he did in the past has an effect on the events in the future. Time travel without consequences was an interesting one that you can go back in time and anything you say or do wasn't gonna affect the future, which is interesting because if time is linear, it's a straight line, then either past moments are contained within themselves, that whatever you do in that moment doesn't affect the future, or as I've seen in just other videos I've seen, articles I've read, it's it's from our perspective contained because it's not affecting the future,
Right.
but it's actually, I guess, kind of like in Back to the Future Part 2, it just creates an alternate reality.
Exactly.
So,
Like it splits off into its own thing that,
yeah.
like, if you were living in Back to the Future universe or timeline prime, I don't know what you'd call it, but let's call it that, then you wouldn't perceive any of these changes. Nothing's changed for you. It's just a branch in the timeline's been created and it's its own thing.
Yeah, and you see that in the Loki series on Disney Plus. And
Exactly.
what's interesting about, well, let's go back to Endgame is
Yeah.
when Bruce Banner says he kind of like debunks all of the time travel and all of the movies. But it does make sense that if time is, let's say time is linear, you're going back into the past, but that's kind of your future. This is what you're gonna do in the coming moments, which is a future event that just happens to take place in the past.
Exactly.
You, see, I mean, it's weird. It's crazy to think about, but it's really cool.
It is. And one thing for me that I've always thought about watching time travel movies since I was pretty little is what, like, it's like a chicken and the egg thing. Like,
Yeah.
do you start with the decision to go back in time, and then let's say you change the past or change the future, you start with the decision to do that, or was there something in the past or future that made it so you were going to make the decision? So it's like and I'm going to come back to this because there's another movie that a lot of people might not know, but were you predestined to do this from the beginning?
Ah, that's interesting, and I'll have a point to make on that in just a moment. But what was your I didn't mean to cut you off,
Oh, it's cool.
but you said there was a movie you would reference that people might not be familiar with.
Yes, it's a great time travel movie slash time loop movie from about 10 years ago called Predestination. It's with Ethan
Uh,
Hawke, and he plays basically like, I don't know what you, I forget exactly what they call it, but he's like a time agent who is sent to figure out like the identity of this terrorist bomber before he can do anything. And it turns into a whole thing with like a bunch of crazy plot twists. It's a fantastic movie, and if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out.
yeah, I haven't seen it, but I have heard of it.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, when you said predestined,
Yeah.
that kind of started me thinking of this was actually a short little video that I sent on the bootstrap paradox.
Yeah, yeah, I saw.
So is like predestined from like a higher being, or predestined because you are the one that went back in time to give yourself the manual on how to build a time machine, which I guess that's kind of a loop in of itself because
Yeah.
you receive the manual from your future self on how to build the time machine, but so you can only build the time machine because you got the book from your future self, which you were only able to give yourself because of the time machine. So how do you build the time machine without the book, and how do you get the book without the time machine? Which goes back to your chicken and egg reference. So is there really a beginning and end, or are we just looking at a loop here? And one thing that, in kind of jotting down some notes for this video, is you have movies like Groundhog Day that are set within a time loop,
Yeah.
and even I can't remember which segment it was, but the Disney holiday film Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas.
Oh yeah.
There's a segment there, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie make a wish that every day is Christmas.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a loop. It's a time loop. So then they begin to realize that it's Christmas every day. So that started me thinking: are are we in a sense, or at least in that moment, kind of outside of time that we're able to recognize? Wait, this is a time loop. We've already relived this,
Yeah, they're
and then you
obviously
can
conscious of it. Go ahead.
yeah, because if you're reliving the same moment, you would almost think that you would still be within that moment and not realize that it's being replayed over and over
Yeah.
until until I don't know, I guess you consciously break from that loop and you begin to see that the time is in a you get what I'm saying though.
No, I do. I was just thinking like how would you, if you're not conscious of it from the very beginning, how would you break out of that loop in your own mind? And then you would just go crazy trying to figure out how to stop it because you can't really. But like in Groundhog Day, he does eventually end it, but it's through a sort of rediscovery of what it means to be a decent person. So it's not something that he would have known to do other than just like, you know, I'm going to make the best of the situation. I better be altruistic because this is all I've got left.
Yeah, I think we see the same thing in the Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas, is
Yeah.
that they want every day to be Christmas, but then they realize, it's really takes the what's special about Christmas out of Christmas, and kind of have that sort of, like re-examination of what they thought the meaning of Christmas was. So I can see how they're related, and how a new perspective of your life or the meaning of life can in a way break you from that mold and allow you to complete that day and move on to the next day.
Yeah. But then that gets into an interesting question of like, why did this happen to them? Was it some like higher being doing this? Was it a deity? Was it some sort of, I don't know, like Cthulhu outer gods type or elder gods type thing?
Yeah, see, it's a loop in itself
Yeah.
because you have a question and you answer it with another question, and you answer that question, and that's gonna lead to 10 other questions.
Exactly. It just goes on and on.
But see, that's why I think time travel movies are so cool, is because there really isn't a right or wrong way to bend time, or because each movie's gonna have its own set of laws regarding time travel and what you can and can't do, or what could happen if you alter the past.
Yeah.
And going back to Einstein, it's theoretical, so it can happen, but because we can't time travel just yet, it's kind of anybody's guess as to what may or may not happen. I mean,
One
I think
question.
movies like Interstellar uh, do rely on science fact or hard science
Yeah,
versus science fiction,
that's a good way to put it.
and that itself, I think, is kind of the bootstrap paradox. Have you seen Interstellar?
Oh yeah. I actually
Uh,
saw it again fairly recently.
all right, so at the beginning when Matthew McConaughey's character sees the books falling off the shelf. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. And
Yeah,
then
and it
uh,
turns out it's him from the future. So that's that paradox again, is how can he give himself the message if he hasn't gone to the future yet?
that is the mystery. I mean, what do you start with in that scenario? Do you start with this is a decision that Matthew McConaughey made way back, you know, or sorry, I lost my train of thought. Is it a decision that he makes toward the end of the movie to like push the book to get his daughter's attention? Was that a decision he made then, or was it something that was always going to happen, whether he wanted it to or not?
It goes back to the predestination you mentioned.
Yeah,
So if it was his own decision, could you say that in a way, for like his past self, it was predestination that this was gonna happen, but it was predestined by his future self by making the decision to go back?
it could. It could. It gets you thinking. I
It
like
does. It does.
I could
Uh,
I keep going in circles with it, and eventually I just have to say like while I'm watching the movie, I just have to be like, you got to stay in this lane, see it to the end. You can think about this later, because sometimes the rules of time travel in certain movies could kind of make you go crazy, just thinking of
yeah.
like what could have been, what should be,
Yeah.
but
No. No.
you don't know what
Definitely.
should be in real life because obviously
Yeah.
we haven't been able to try it yet. And that gets to a question that I've had. If we somehow got the ability to travel through time, should we do it?
Yeah. Yeah. And just to kind of lead into an answer for that, I've always thought it would be easier. Well, I always thought you could go back in time, because how can you go forward in time if the future hasn't happened yet?
It's another
But
paradox.
yeah, but what's interesting is some of the time travel videos I was watching recently actually argued the opposite, that you can travel into the future, but maybe we can't travel back in time. And the whole thing with traveling into the future has to do with like when you're traveling, let's say, let's go back again, that time is linear, it's a straight line, and it's always moving forward. So if you start traveling faster as you approach the speed of light, time is gonna move more slowly for you
Right.
relative to everyone else. So I don't know if you've seen the movie Lightyear.
Yes, I have.
Okay, so that's time dilation. So the faster Buzz Lightyear is traveling, time is moving for everybody else, but it's slow for him. So that's why when he returns, I don't remember quite how much time had passed for everybody else, but he's essentially still relatively the same age as when he left, maybe just a few hours older, but for
Yeah,
everybody else,
it'd have been
years
decades.
and years went by. So for him, he's pretty much traveling into the future. So that's where I was coming from, that in the videos I've seen, it actually argues the opposite of what I thought.
Okay,
That you
yeah.
could travel back in time because it's already happened, you can revisit it, but you can't go to the future because it hasn't happened yet. But as the science suggests, you can go into the future, but you just can't go back into the past.
Right.
So, based on what you said, should we travel back in time or forward in time? Well, I guess we're already moving forward through time,
Well, yeah.
but if I were to travel light years ahead and I come back to Earth and say like 50 years has gone by, I guess that's something that I wouldn't really have any control over. Which
Right.
this is going to branch out into Back to the Future Part 2, but just to focus on your question, uh, going back in time, I guess it would really depend on what scenario from science fiction we're looking at. If it's something that you alter the past and it changes the future, then we probably shouldn't be going back in time because you
No,
don't know
I don't
who's
think
gonna
so.
go back in time. But if it's one of those scenarios where you can go back in time and you can show George Washington a cell phone or something and it's not gonna influence any future event, then I guess that would be all right because
I'd be all
or
for it if it's just like a history lesson. You're just observing what's going on, but nothing you do matters, and it's all going to stay the same.
so if nothing you do matters, then why would we have history books? Because your history book will say one thing, but it's never gonna say, "Oh, George Washington met up with Bill and Ted." You know what I mean?
Right. But
So
I think that's like it would be interesting if you could do that just for like research purposes because although a lot of history is really well documented, especially like you know the Roman Empire, the modern era, there are places where we have gaps in knowledge that we'd like to have filled in. And especially for like the really fine grained, like non macro events, like if you want to find out like biographical details that we just don't have for someone who's been dead for 500 years, it would be really cool to do that, just to sort of shadow this person in their daily life for a little bit.
yeah, and funny that you should say shadow this person
Yeah.
because I think of what's it called? I think of A Christmas Carol
Oh,
with
yeah, yeah.
Scrooge as a bit of a time travel movie because he is
It is, in a
technically
sense, yeah.
going into the past, but the ghost of Christmas past tells him that everything that they're seeing back in time are just shadows of those past events. So they can't interact with anybody, and nobody from the past can interact with them because they're pretty much just like watching home movies of the past.
Pretty much, yeah.
You can shout at the person, but they're not going to hear you. So I've kind of wondered, is that what traveling to the past could be like? You can try to reach out, touch somebody or something, but you're just kind of reliving the moment that's already
Yeah.
happened, so you have no influence or effect on them.
And then what do you think of that? where I think of the ethics of traveling forward in time, I would say the negative effects of that are mostly on the individual doing it and their immediate family and friends, because like we saw with Interstellar, if you travel faster than the speed of light, you're going to come out on the other side basically the same, but everyone else has aged a lot, so you've
Yeah.
missed their lives completely. So how does one deal with that psychologically, physically, emotionally?
Yeah, I know the story of Rip Van Winkle.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he wakes up, and when he goes back to town he finds out that like 20 years had gone by and his son is all grown up.
yeah,
So naturally and understandably he is pretty shocked at seeing all this because he essentially missed his son growing up. But like in Back to the Future Part 2, they can go forward in time and see everything that's gonna happen.
yeah,
So, I mean that opens up a couple questions there. In that article, one of the categories was, is the future already written? So I guess you could say maybe in like Interstellar it is, because from Matthew McConaughey's perspective, I don't remember his character's name, but from his perspective, he's living right here in the past, and something is affecting the books, which we later find out is him in the future. So is the future already written there that this is gonna happen, and he's seeing the effects of that in his what would be the past, or that version of him, his present.
yeah.
But in Back to the Future, yeah, you could say the future was already written when they travel to 2015. But in a sense, it's in a way not yet written because they can influence the events before they even happen. So instead of Marty Jr. Going to jail, it's Griff and his gang that go to jail. So in a way, the future isn't written because they can still influence the future events.
So take it back to Marvel. This made me think of this, where in Infinity War, this isn't really time travel related, but it could have implications for it. When Doctor Strange mentions to Tony Stark that like he sees all these different scenarios of how things could play out. If you're traveling into the future, which direction would you go as far as like there's so many ways that every
Oh,
situation could play out, and you could have all of these branching timelines where they could be subtle changes from one to the next or very big changes. But which one would you in fact be going to? Like would it just be,
yeah.
would you stay in like your sort of prime timeline, or would you take a little journey off to the side? I mean, I guess it
True.
depends on what would happen as you're traveling, but it's
Yeah,
just something I think of.
because if you're only advancing through time on your prime timeline, but Doctor Strange sees multiple events, then or multiple scenarios, then couldn't you say that those multiple scenarios are multiple prime timelines?
Well, for the people living in those timelines, they are, I
Yeah.
guess. But yeah, it's just it's interesting to think about, and I don't know if like a lot of movies or TV shows really explore that in depth. Like,
Yeah.
am I in my timeline, or am I effectively living in a world that is not mine anymore?
Right, so like Back to the Future Part 2,
Yeah.
when Biff gives himself the almanac and it creates an alternate 1985.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
so if Doc and Marty are from, let's just call it the prime timeline, and now they're in the Biff timeline. So does the Biff timeline erase the prime timeline and that's now the prime timeline, or is that just an
That's
alternate?
why I didn't mention that before, because I'm not clear if in Back to the Future it's like the actions of the characters overwrite the timeline and there's just one timeline, or if we are seeing the branch that has gone off in a different direction.
Yeah, because if it's a branch going off in another direction, then there would be another Biff World Doc and Marty counterpart.
Yeah,
Interesting. I never really thought of that until just discussing it right now. But
yeah.
I know in the example when Doc is explaining it to Marty, he says the timeline skewed into an alternate 1985. But
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
he could just be saying it's alternate to them. But I know he says alternate to them in reality to everyone else, but that reality to everybody else could still be either a replacement of the prime timeline or the reality to everyone living in the Biff timeline.
There's got to be some like Back to the Future Bible that explains all of
Ah,
this.
I, I, I don't know if it goes into any details regarding this. I've actually wanted to look for it and purchase a copy, but a couple years ago, there was a book published called Doc Brown's Owner's Manual,
Oh, okay.
and I think it's like some like notes and behind the scenes of Back to the Future. So I don't know if they address that, but that would be really interesting, and that's something I do want to look into finding on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, wherever.
Oh,
But
yeah.
hopefully that will shed some light on some of the thinking behind the time travel we see in the movie,
Maybe, maybe.
which I know that there's been some discussion regarding the time travel in Endgame, that some of it doesn't really line up, like the fact that Captain America stays back in time. So, does he retain his memories of fighting Thanos and Loki? Does he remember all of these things happening? Or does he go back in time and now his mind is like converted to that moment of time and he has no memory of anything that he did in future events?
Well, we don't really get a clue on that because the last time we see him, he's an old man and he's reminiscing about being with Peggy. But that would be an interesting question for the Russo brothers or Chris Marcus and
Yeah,
Stephen McFeely.
because he knew who Sam was.
He did. So that, well, that would
So,
seem to imply that he remembers, but
yeah,
doesn't
but
remember everything.
there seems to be an implication that there's a bit of a contradiction, and I didn't think of revisiting that topic prior to our video here, but there was some discussion on how time travel works and how it affects you, that they did address. So I'm gonna have to check that out
Oh
later
yes,
on and see what it was that they did say, and we can always bring that up in part two of our time travel
sure.
discussion. And now, I don't know if you've ever heard of the movie Run Lola Run.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
do
that
remember
was one
that.
that I thought of last night. Now, it's not a time travel movie.
No, but
It's
it does have a lot
like,
to do with like time paradoxes and looping timelines.
yeah, it's kind of like time resets.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's. I don't remember ever seeing another movie where they actually reset time when something didn't occur the way it was meant to, so they just hit the button and start all over.
right.
Yeah, because with they're not really starting things over in Endgame. They're just putting the stones back where they got them. So it's like those never happened.
Yeah, it's like they want to change what is going on in their present, but it's not like a comprehensive rewriting of everything. Like, although we do see that there are some changes after the fact.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into for the Marvel universe the concept of multiverses,
Yes.
which is a topic I would like to go over in a future video because for me that just opens up a number of different things, mainly in movies.
Yeah.
I won't get into it right now, but I in movies at least I don't like the concept of the multiverse, or to an extent I should say, because Spider-Man No Way Home was pretty cool in exploring
Oh, that
your
one. Yeah.
multiversal counterparts, but I don't particularly like the idea of the multiverse as just like a plot device to.
I don't think it works for the MCU as a whole. It
Yeah,
works in
exactly.
individual pieces of it, but I feel like it's almost a cheat code for when they want to bring someone back
Yep,
and
that's
they can just say, "Oh, not the same guy, technically a different character."
that's exactly what I'm thinking. Is that it's cool when you see it in No Way Home, but when you're using it just to make other movies or to bring back characters, I don't like the idea.
No,
And
me
you know,
neither.
if they bring back like a Tony Stark from another reality, then it just undermines his whole sacrifice at the end of Endgame.
I agree.
True, it's a different version of Tony Stark, but for me, it's
It's
just
Tony
like,
Stark.
okay, you're just using this exactly as you said. It's a cheat code just to bring another a previous character back.
Yeah, and I know one of now that we've got Robert Downey Jr., he's going to play Doctor Doom. One of my coworkers was talking about like, oh, I'm worried that it's going to be like basically alternate Tony Stark and not really like original Victor Von Doom. And I understand his fear. I hope they don't go with that because
Yeah,
I want it to be like a firmly different character, not just evil Tony.
yeah. And see, and they can certainly do that. Just
They
have
can.
an actor play a different character. In fact, the MCU has actually done that.
They
Um,
have.
yeah, the who was it? I don't know their names, but there's a lady in the first Avenger when
You're.
Captain America's on his press tour.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, and she actually plays Star Lord's mom.
Yep.
But see, there's no implication that it's supposed to be the same character,
No, not at all. And
and the
then
same with one of the Howling
I was
Commandos.
just gonna say that. And then he's later he's the principal at Peter's school.
Yeah. Now, in that one, I did read that he's supposed to be like the grandson
Okay, yeah.
of the Howling Commando,
I thought I
but
heard
with
that.
Star Lord's mom, they don't say if she's supposed to be
No, they don't
related
go
in
at all.
some way. Just happens to be two different characters played by the same actor, the same actress.
And you know what?
So
That's
they can
totally
certainly do
fine.
that. What's that?
I was just saying that's totally fine.
Yeah, one of the things that I didn't particularly like in just reading about um, an alternate Tony Stark is that, or no, not an alternate Tony Stark, but having an authentic Victor Von Doom, and then the characters will say, "Oh, you look a lot like Tony Stark," or because it's just drawing attention to the fact
Yeah.
that the character is played by the same actor, and to
Yeah, you
me
understand
that just
that.
breaks the whole suspension of disbelief. um like I don't know if you saw the preview or the trailer for the new Captain America
Yes.
movie with Harrison Ford when he says, I'm getting used to the new look,"
Yeah.
kind of hinting at the character's played by a different actor.
Yeah. And in
And
that
then he
case,
goes on with the joke that, they said shave off the mustache.
yeah, in that
So,
case, they didn't have a choice. William Hurt's dead, so
yeah, but for me,
eh,
I don't like the fact that they drew attention to that because for me, it just breaks the suspension of disbelief. So, regardless of
yeah,
who's
I get
playing
it.
the role, when you're watching a movie, you're just seeing that character. But here, they kind of break the fourth wall and remind you, oh, you're looking at the same character, but a different actor.
Yeah.
And because the MCU isn't Deadpool, that they can get away with breaking the fourth wall and these kind of meta jokes, it just sticks out to me that they do that. I mean, I get it, but I just don't like it because
I see
it
what you're
it's
saying.
it doesn't conform to the mold that the MCU has established. Whereas with Deadpool, they do that all the time. It's self aware that they're characters in a movie.
Yeah,
So it makes sense to do that in a Deadpool movie.
it would be weird
But
if they didn't.
in yeah, and in an MCU film, it just to me it just doesn't work that you're just drawing attention to this. So when in a video I was watching some time ago on YouTube, they postulated that maybe they could do that, like, oh, Tony, and then he turns around, oh, you're not Tony, and it's Doctor Doom. So it's just kind of drawing attention that it's a it's played by the same actor, so they're
Yeah.
in a way self-aware, and just kind of that whole multiversal thing I just wasn't really on board with.
Now, if
But
they,
when you explore it like they did in No Way Home, I thought that worked really well.
yeah, and I think if they wanted to do something where like they think it's Tony at first, but then it's not, if they really work that into the story and make it part of the drama, that could be interesting. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have this character who they think is their old friend, or at least a version of him, and then it turns out it's someone completely different and more sinister. Maybe that could be interesting.
Yeah, because it's not unheard of that you can mistake somebody for somebody else in real life because there's some sort
Oh
of
yeah,
resemblance. But clearly, that doesn't mean that this individual is uh, an alternate version of the person you
no,
originally thought it was.
yeah.
And so you can easily do that, but I don't know how Marvel's gonna approach that. I'm hoping that it's just Robert Downey Jr. playing Doctor Doom and
That would
not
be my first
alternate
choice.
Tony Stark who just turns evil.
Yeah, that would be my preference, but we'll see. I'm sure they'll
Yeah,
have
and
something up their sleeve.
yeah, and just one last note on the multiverse. I again, I don't know if I really like exploring the multiverse over the course of several years and X number of movies because I think it just kind of gets jumbled up. It
It
can
does.
kind of get confusing that you're trying to interlock so many movies and timelines and storylines with each other that I think the multiverse works as just one film. And
I think
even
so.
though
Yeah.
No Way Home didn't necessarily explore the multiverse, uh, I think it would work better if it was just done in one movie. And
Yeah.
one thing that comes to mind is I don't know if you remember the Fairly Odd Parents special Channel Chasers.
I do. I
See,
remember
so
very well.
it's it's not technically exploring the multiverse, but they explore different TV channels, which you could do that same thing in, but just swap out TV channels for the multiverse.
It is
And
similar in
what
terms of the mechanics.
the what?
It is similar in terms of the mechanics. I never thought of
Oh
it
yeah,
that
yeah.
way, but you make a good point with that.
And see, so an MCU film is easily like 2.5 hours long. Channel Chasers was probably like an hour long with
Yeah.
commercials. So I mean, if they could do that, if they could explore a whole multiverse in the course of say like 45 minutes, then certainly you could do that in a two
Oh yeah.
hour movie.
I also
So
thought,
for me, I think it would work better just one and done. Okay, we explored it. Let's
yeah,
go. But I guess with the MCU, it's a business, so they're making multiple movies for all the different franchises,
yeah,
and how altering this or this character's alternate universe and just explore that character and what they do there. I don't
yeah.
know. I think it just works better as one film instead of a whole, what do they call it, like phase of the
Hmm.
MCU.
I
That's kind
also
of
like
my nitpick with that.
I liked Multiverse of Madness too. Not as much as No Way Home, but I did enjoy it. So it's funny, even though I don't like the general idea of the multiverse in the MCU, the ones that are most overt with it are, I think, some of the better ones of the recent phases. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
How
something
did you
that
like how did you like Multiverse of Madness? Was that a good movie?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought that it started off kind of iffy, but it gets a lot better as it goes along. And it's
Okay.
actually in the multiversal aspects that those are one of its strong points.
Yeah, so I started watching it. It was on TV a while ago, but I guess I need to get past the iffy part
Yeah, it
because I was watching it. I was like, yeah,
it
I don't
gets
know how I
better.
feel about this. So I ended up just putting something different on. So whenever it comes back on, yeah, I'll watch
Yeah,
past where I stopped and
give it another
check it out.
chance.
Now, now that you mention Doctor Strange, going back real quick to time travel, what I thought was interesting was in the first movie, he uses the time stone to put, was it Hong Kong? Put the
I
Hong
think so.
Kong
Yeah,
sanctum back together. So I thought, you know, if I'm outside of the city, if I look out the window and I can see just this whole section be rebuilt?
that's a good question. I don't know if it would be perceptible to them, but I don't know. I just kind of assumed like because it was magic, they wouldn't see it. It would just be like it never happened.
Okay, like
But
putting the stones back in their original places kind of erases those alternate timelines. So
that's what I would have
just
thought at least.
using the magic to uh, fix something in the past, like in this case, rebuild the sanctum. We just don't really, we're not aware of it. We just say, oh, it's destroyed, and then boom. Okay, there it is. Nothing ever happened to it. It's all in
Yeah.
one
I mean,
piece.
I'm sure they would know like bad things were going on, but maybe just like they they don't perceive how it gets fixed. It's just that I'm
Yeah.
I'm almost changing my mind midstream.
But I'm thinking of the end of Infinity War when uh, I don't know how did that happen. So Thanos uses the Time Stone to bring Vision back to life, so we can get the stone,
Yeah, right.
the Mind Stone. But Wanda is there, and she's seeing him essentially being like brought back to life, so she's aware of this change. So with
That's
that
true.
logic in mind, then people who are witnessing everything going on in Hong Kong should probably be witness to everything kind of going back into place.
But Wanda's not a normal human being.
That is also true. And also, I'm sure, they're works of fiction, so I don't
Yeah.
know how deep they dove into this to say, well, this the scene in this movie contradicts what's going on in this movie. I mean, I think the MC has just been built up so much that I'm sure there's something that would be overlooked unless
Oh yeah,
they've
for
got
sure.
people just like scouring every moment of every film from 2008 up till now to make sure, okay, what we're doing in this film, we got to change. What you're doing in that film, it's gonna contradict what happened in last year's film.
Yeah. And if
So
you do
that's
too
why I
much of
think,
that, it handicaps you for future installments. Like it kind of you're backed into a corner as far as what you can write.
yeah, and you see, the MCU I think has just grown so big that it just makes it harder. For me, it ended with Endgame. There was a clear beginning, middle, and end. And at first, with the post Endgame movies, they just kind of seemed like one and done movies, which is fine, but
Yeah.
they're just trying to interlock them with what was already done and just kind of trying to expand it more and more and more. But Endgame was it for me. If they wanted to do more, that's cool, but maybe have it unrelated to the Infinity Saga,
I know
just
what
so
you mean.
everything is kind of like contained and you're not trying to build something bigger and bigger and bigger. So kind of like Jenga blocks, you stack it up too high, it's gonna topple over.
Yeah.
That's just my perspective on the current state of the MCU, is that they're just trying to stack it up bigger and bigger and higher.
And it's interesting that some of the best ones that they've made since Endgame still kind of tie up loose ends from Endgame, or at least from the wider Infinity Saga, like the two Spider-Man movies, like Guardians of the
Yeah,
Galaxy 3.
I didn't see Volume 3, but I did
Oh, it's
see
really
No Way
good.
Home. I mean, I didn't see Volume 3, but I just read the summary on Wikipedia, so
Yeah,
anything that you say, it's not going to spoil it for me. And
right. Yeah.
even if I hadn't read it, yeah, I'm not one for, don't spoil it for me, except for like a very few number of movies that, like Sonic 3 coming up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna read the summary of that. But like most other movies, this is interesting. Let's just read what this is about. Okay, cool,
Yeah.
I got it. But
It's not
there's
just
just that
about
handful that
it's
I
not
wouldn't.
just about what happens, it's about how they do it that's interesting.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's true too.
yeah. Like I'm kind of like don't spoil it for me, but if you do, I'm not going to get mad at you.
Right? Yeah. Like you can just give me the basics, but don't paint the full picture.
Yeah. But people slip up. I get it. It's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So Volume 3, I didn't see. Uh, the majority of the content post Endgame, I haven't seen,
Oh,
but I did see the first season of Loki, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision,
oh yeah.
and then as far as the movies go, I've only seen Shang-Chi
Which I
and
liked.
No Way Home, which all of them I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Uh,
There are a lot
I
of good ones.
started, yeah. I really enjoyed Shang-Chi. I did kind of wish that that was just its own standalone movie and not part of the greater MCU. The I didn't see Deadpool and Wolverine, but
That one
that
was
that uh that looked fun with all of like the time together, not just the MCU, but the other Marvel universes from like Fox, and bring them all together. And
yeah.
I
It was
thought that
nice
was
knowing all that.
pretty funny how they did all those callbacks, like the big Fox logo when the was it like the erased world. I can't think of what
Yeah.
it's called, but those are pretty fun nods, and that's how I was saying before that. Uh, Deadpool can get away with it because they break the fourth wall. It's very
Cool.
self aware, whereas in Captain America, what's it called, Brave New World, it just, the joke felt out of place that
Yeah.
Thaddeus Ross is played by a different actor because of the fact that they're not meta like Deadpool
Yeah.
is.
And you're used to a much more serious tone in general with those. Where like the Captain America movies, obviously they have their moments of levity and humor, but they are definitely on the darker side. Whereas
Yeah.
I don't think a meta joke like that would feel as out of place in like Guardians of the Galaxy or Ant Man, but
Yeah, no,
it would
movies
be
like that
different.
for sure. Because they're more humorous.
Yeah, but it hits differently with Deadpool because that's his wheelhouse. Like he
Yeah,
knows his
that's like
original
what
character.
Deadpool's built around is the self awareness and just being completely meta. Like, oh, I'm in a movie.
Exactly.
I think it was I don't remember seeing it in the movie, but maybe it was just a promotional thing for the second Deadpool. Was when he encounters Cable, he says, "Aren't you the bad guy in Infinity War?"
Oh right. I can't remember if that was actually in the movie. I think that
Yeah,
was just
I was
marketing.
in I remember on like a preview or something, so maybe it was just a promotional material, but
I'm thinking
it
it
could
was.
easily
That
fit
was.
in the movie.
I got a chuckle out of it though.
Yeah, because you know what it is. It's what the movies are all about. Just being again, just being self aware that these are that they're movies. It's their characters in a movie,
Yeah.
which kind of goes back to the timeline, the time travel concept of how we are explaining or discussing earlier. Is all of this brought about by a a higher being, some sort of divine intervention? So if that were the case and we're aware of the higher being, then are we meta in our own world? That we know that we're actors, and how does the saying go? And all the world's a stage and each of us play a part. So is
Yeah,
that
we
our
are merely
own
players.
meta of reality?
That that is a way to put it.
You see, that's the crazy thing about discussing topics like the multiverse and time travel is you come
Oh
up
yeah.
with all of these cool and bizarre concepts and ideas that they're the head scratchers.
Oh, for
They
sure.
make you think,
And it's
and
also
sometimes they make your brain burst and it oozes out of your ears,
yeah.
or
And
so it feels.
you also get a lot of like philosophical questions going, like not
Yeah,
just what is or what could be, what should be. So that's one of the most interesting aspects of time travel, time loops, anything like that to me. Just like not just what it is, but what it says about us.
yeah, and that's those are those go back to like H.P. Lovecraft for me.
Yeah,
Is even though he didn't write anything on traveling through time, at least not that I can think of.
I don't think so.
But the fact that it's just things that the human mind can't comprehend,
Yeah,
and like many Lovecraftian protagonists, you drive yourself to insanity just trying to comprehend these things.
definitely.
Before we log out, do you have any final thoughts on the multiverse or time travel?
I think we've summed it up pretty well so far. I mean, there are things I could keep going with, but it would just be more movie recommendations, really.
Yeah,
'Cause there are a
same with
ton of
me.
them.
Yeah, like there was Dial of Destiny had that time travel at the very end.
That was the most interesting thing about the movie.
Yeah, and you know I really like I'm really fascinated by the concept of time travel. So Dial
Yeah,
of Destiny was really interesting for me. You know, let's plan on Indiana Jones as a future topic.
I love Indiana Jones. I'm all for it.
Excellent, and I think I've got a fedora somewhere, or if it still fits me. I've had this thing forever, but
Oh, I'd love to see it.
yeah. So like right here, I got my Marty McFly vest,
Yeah,
and in the movie he wears a red T-shirt, so that's why I went with red today.
good. Very
So
good.
when we do Indiana Jones, I'll wear something kind of reminiscent of the adventurers.
Can't wait.
Yeah. So So, for everybody tuning in, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the past, the present, and the future. In this reality, or maybe in a multiversal reality, who knows? So,
Who
our
knows
paths will
indeed.
certainly cross somewhere and someone.